The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek presents a radical challenge to how most leaders think about success. The central argument of the book is that business, leadership, politics, relationships, and life itself are not finite games that can be won. They are infinite games that must be sustained. Most leaders unknowingly operate with a finite mindset in environments that are fundamentally infinite. And this mismatch creates many of the organizational problems that plague modern institutions. To understand the depth of Sinek's argument, it is necessary to begin with the distinction between finite and infinite games, a concept originally developed by philosopher James P. Cass. A finite game has known players, fixed rules, agreed upon objectives, and a clear endpoint. Sports are the most obvious example. In a football match, everyone knows the rules, the players, the duration, and the method of determining a winner. At the end of the game, someone wins and someone loses. The purpose of the game is victory. An infinite game operates according to entirely different principles. In an infinite game, the players may be known or unknown. The rules may evolve over time. New participants constantly enter, existing participants leave, and there is no agreed-upon finish line. There is no final championship, no permanent winner, and no ultimate scoreboard. The objective is not to win. The objective is to continue playing. Business perfectly fits this description. No company ever permanently wins business. No organization reaches a point where it can declare eternal victory and stop competing. Even the most dominant companies eventually face new technologies, new competitors, new consumer expectations, and new market realities. The same principle applies to marriage. Nobody wins marriage. Nobody receives a trophy after 20 years, declaring permanent success. Marriage succeeds only if it continues functioning over time. Politics is infinite. Education is infinite. Human civilization itself is infinite. The most dangerous mistake leaders make is treating these infinite environments as if they were finite competitions. When leaders focus exclusively on beating competitors, dominating market share, maximizing quarterly earnings, or climbing rankings, they begin optimizing for short-term victories rather than long-term sustainability. This finite mindset gradually erodes the very foundations that allow organizations to survive. A company may outperform competitors this quarter, while simultaneously weakening employee trust, reducing innovation, and damaging customer loyalty. A politician may win an election while undermining democratic institutions. A spouse may win an argument while weakening a relationship. In every case, finite thinking confuses temporary success with lasting success. Sinek argues that the ultimate failure in an infinite game is not losing. It is being forced out of the game entirely. To navigate an infinite game successfully, Sinek proposes 5 essential practices. The first is advancing a just cause. A just cause is not a goal, a strategy, a mission statement, or a financial target. It is a specific vision of a future state so inspiring that people willingly sacrifice for its advancement. A true just cause must be affirmative, describing a positive future rather than opposition to an enemy. It must be inclusive, allowing many people to contribute. It must be resilient, remaining relevant across generations. It must be idealistic enough to inspire people beyond financial incentives. Most corporate mission statements fail this standard because they focus on objectives such as becoming number one, maximizing shareholder value, dominating a market, or increasing revenue. These are finite ambitions because they can theoretically be achieved. A just cause, by contrast, is never fully completed. It functions as a guiding star rather than a destination. The purpose of a just cause is to provide direction during uncertainty. When organizations encounter difficult decisions, a just cause serves as a compass. Leaders can ask whether a particular decision advances the cause or merely improves short-term metrics. Organizations without a just cause often drift toward internal politics, because no higher purpose unites people. Employees become motivated primarily by compensation, status, and self-interest. While these incentives can produce compliance, they rarely produce commitment. Commitment emerges when people believe they are contributing to something larger than themselves. Sinek argues that companies capable of sustaining extraordinary performance over decades are almost always driven by causes that transcend profit. Profit remains necessary, but it becomes fuel rather than destination. The second essential practice is building trusting teams. Sinek views trust not as a soft or emotional concept, but as a strategic asset. In uncertain environments, trust becomes one of the most important competitive advantages available. Trusting teams emerge when people experience psychological safety. Psychological safety means employees feel secure enough to admit mistakes, ask questions, challenge assumptions, and express concerns without fear of embarrassment or punishment. This concept becomes especially important in environments requiring innovation and adaptation, because innovation depends upon honest communication. People cannot solve problems they are afraid to discuss. One of the book's most powerful examples comes from the culture of the Navy SEALs. Within the SEALs, candidates are evaluated according to two dimensions: performance and trust. This creates four possible categories. A person may demonstrate high performance and high trust, high performance and low trust, low performance and high trust, or low performance and low trust. Most organizations instinctively prioritize performance. The SEALs prioritize trust. They would rather work with someone who demonstrates moderate competence but high trust than someone who demonstrates exceptional competence but low trust. The reason is simple. Low trust high performers often become organizational toxins. They may produce impressive individual results, but they create fear, discourage collaboration, undermine morale, and reduce transparency. Over time, their damage exceeds their contribution. Infinite-minded leaders understand that culture compounds over time. Trust compounds over time. Relationships compound over time. A single toxic individual can create damage that spreads throughout an organization. When trust is absent, employees conceal problems. Departments blame each other. Communication deteriorates, and decision quality declines. Organizations become increasingly fragile because leaders receive distorted information. Trust, therefore, becomes essential, not only for culture, but also for strategic adaptability. The third practice is studying worthy rivals. Most organizations view competitors as enemies to be defeated. Sinek argues that this perspective limits learning. Infinite-minded leaders instead treat competitors as worthy rivals. A worthy rival is not someone to hate, but someone from whom valuable lessons can be learned. Competitors reveal weaknesses, expose blind spots, and highlight capabilities that may be underdeveloped within an organization. Rather than generating hostility, they generate insight. One of Sinek's most frequently cited examples involves the historical competition between Apple and Microsoft during the era of the Zune and the iPod. Microsoft largely approached the challenge through a finite lens. The objective was to beat Apple. The Zune emerged as a reaction to Apple's success. Apple, by contrast, remained focused on advancing its own vision for consumer technology and user experience. Rather than defining itself by opposition to competitors, Apple concentrated on its own cause. Sinek argues that organizations become strategically vulnerable when competitors dominate their attention. The moment a company defines itself by opposition, it loses creative independence. Worthy rivals serve a different function. They help leaders identify opportunities for self-improvement. If a competitor excels at customer service, study their methods. If another company attracts exceptional talent, examine its culture. If another organization innovates faster, investigate its systems. The purpose is not imitation, but learning. Organizations obsessed with defeating competitors often become reactive rather than proactive. They spend their energy responding instead of creating. Infinite-minded organizations focus primarily on improving themselves, while using competitors as sources of insight. The fourth practice is preparing for existential flexibility. This concept refers to the capacity of leaders to execute profound strategic shifts in order to advance their just cause. Existential flexibility is not ordinary adaptation. It is transformational adaptation. Infinite-minded leaders understand that preserving a cause sometimes requires abandoning the business model that originally supported it. Many organizations fail because they become emotionally attached to past success. They assume that strategies which worked previously will continue working indefinitely. History repeatedly demonstrates the danger of this assumption. Markets evolve. Technologies change. Consumer expectations shift. Organizations that cannot adapt eventually become irrelevant. Sinek discusses examples such as the Walt Disney Company and Apple, both of which repeatedly reinvented themselves. Disney expanded beyond animation into theme parks, television, merchandise, streaming, and numerous other ventures. Each transition involved significant risk, but these moves advanced the broader cause of creating magical experiences. Apple evolved from computers to music devices, from music devices to smartphones, and from smartphones to integrated digital ecosystems. These transformations required abandoning comfortable assumptions. Existential flexibility often demands that leaders cannibalize existing revenue streams in order to create future opportunities. This is psychologically difficult because current profits feel tangible, while future possibilities remain uncertain. Yet organizations that refuse transformation eventually become prisoners of their own history. Infinite-minded leaders recognize that preserving relevance may require sacrificing short-term comfort. The fifth practice is demonstrating the courage to lead. Sinek argues that maintaining an infinite mindset is difficult precisely because external incentives reward finite behavior. Financial markets reward quarterly performance. Investors demand immediate returns. Media coverage celebrates short-term victories. Executive compensation systems frequently reinforce finite incentives. Everything pushes leaders toward immediate optimization. Infinite-minded leadership often requires resisting these pressures. This resistance can be lonely, because long-term investments frequently appear irrational in the short term. During economic uncertainty, investing in employee development may seem irresponsible. During periods of shareholder pressure, increasing research spending may appear risky. During competitive threats, prioritizing culture may appear inefficient. Yet infinite-minded leaders understand that short-term success and long-term success are not always aligned. The courage to lead means protecting the future even when doing so creates temporary discomfort. It means defending principles during uncertainty. It means making decisions that may not produce visible benefits for years. The greatest leaders think beyond their own tenure. They act as stewards rather than owners. Their objective is not personal recognition, but institutional longevity. Organizations led by finite-minded executives often become servants of metrics. Organizations led by infinite-minded leaders become custodians of causes. One of the most controversial sections of the book focuses on the doctrine of shareholder primacy, associated with economist Milton Friedman. Friedman famously argued that the primary responsibility of business is maximizing shareholder value. Over time, many corporations interpreted this idea narrowly. Stock price became the ultimate measure of success. Sinek argues that this shift fundamentally altered corporate behavior. Organizations increasingly prioritized quarterly earnings over long-term health. Cost-cutting became celebrated. Layoffs became normalized. Financial engineering replaced innovation. Research budgets shrank. Employee development became expendable. One of the companies frequently used to illustrate this trend is General Electric. For much of its history, GE was regarded as one of the world's most admired corporations. However, Sinek argues that excessive emphasis on shareholder returns gradually encouraged short-term thinking. Managers became focused on hitting quarterly targets. Divisions were evaluated through immediate financial performance. Employee security weakened. Strategic horizons shortened. Initially, results appeared impressive. Stock prices increased. Investors celebrated. Executives received substantial compensation. Yet beneath the surface, organizational resilience deteriorated. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout modern corporate history. When companies prioritize shareholders above customers, employees, innovation, and culture, they often damage the very systems that generate shareholder value. Infinite-minded leadership reverses this sequence. Employees come first, customers follow, shareholders benefit as a consequence. Sinek does not argue against profit. Profit remains essential because organizations cannot survive without it. However, profit should function as fuel rather than destination. Just as a person does not view oxygen as the purpose of life, despite needing oxygen to survive, companies should not view profit as their ultimate purpose, despite requiring profit for sustainability. The distinction between finite and infinite leadership becomes increasingly clear when examining behavior. Finite-minded leaders ask how to win. Infinite-minded leaders ask how to continue advancing their cause. Finite-minded leaders focus on quarterly performance and annual rankings. Infinite-minded leaders think in decades and generations. Finite-minded leaders view competitors as enemies. Infinite-minded leaders view them as teachers. Finite-minded leaders treat employees as resources to optimize. Infinite-minded leaders treat employees as human beings entrusted to their care. Finite-minded leaders prioritize short-term gains. Infinite-minded leaders prioritize long-term resilience. Finite-minded cultures often produce fear, internal politics, and defensive behavior. Infinite-minded cultures produce trust, collaboration, and psychological safety. Finite-minded organizations innovate reactively. Infinite-minded organizations innovate proactively. Finite-minded leaders respond to failure by assigning blame. Infinite-minded leaders respond by learning and adapting. Finite-minded leaders cut future-oriented investments. Infinite-minded leaders protect future capabilities even when conditions become difficult. The practical application of the infinite mindset begins with continuous self-auditing. Every manager, founder, executive, and professional can apply the framework by regularly asking a series of questions. Am I making this decision to improve next quarter, or to strengthen the organization 5 years from now? Does this initiative advance our just cause, or merely improve a metric? What can I learn from competitors that reveals my own weaknesses? Have I created enough psychological safety for people to tell me the truth? Are we protecting future capabilities or merely defending present performance? If our current business model disappeared tomorrow, what transformation would our cause require? Are we optimizing for appearance or durability? These questions gradually shift attention away from survival-based competition and toward legacy-based stewardship. Organizations operating with an infinite mindset measure success differently. They evaluate trust alongside performance, culture alongside profit, people alongside products, and purpose alongside growth. They understand that there are no permanent winners in business, leadership, or life. There are only organizations that continue advancing meaningful causes, and organizations that eventually exhaust themselves chasing temporary victories. The ultimate lesson of the infinite game is that enduring success comes not from defeating competitors, but from building institutions capable of adapting, inspiring, learning, and contributing across generations. The objective is not to win. The objective is to remain worthy of continuing the game.